So here they are, the 10 best yoga poses ever. And I'm going to explain a little anatomy, biomechanics to help you understand why I feel these yoga poses are just so good. And believe it or not, there is no Shavasana in this list. Shavasana, come on. We will start with pose number 10, and that is your classical tree pose. Now, a lot of people do tree pose to kind of stretch their inner thigh, to stretch the inside of their hip. I do tree pose because it's a really good pose to get your nervous system prepped for the demands you're going to place on your body during the rest of the class. It gets the brain working. It creates these neural pathways between your brain, your standing hip, and all the way down to your foot. Think of this as a nervous system exercise rather than a stretch for the inside of your hip. Additionally, it's a really good durability exercise for that glute medius that is trying to support and stabilize your hip. So next time you're doing this pose, don't think of this as a stretch. Think about the durability of your standing leg and think about the connection you're creating from your brain all the way down to your toes. Pose number 9, your cat-cow. Technically not a yoga pose, but if you know anything about the history of the modern day yoga pose, you know that yoga poses have kind of evolved over time. The longevity of yoga is because it's very good and clever at using movements from multitude of disciplines. Is that the right word? Yoga uses movements and exercises from lots of different disciplines and adds it into its kind of overall collection of asanas. If there was one exercise that I would advise you do for the long-term health of your spine, it will be cat-cow. You don't need to have a very bendy spine, but as a minimum expectation, you want to be able to move your spine through that full range of motion in cat-cow and not experience any discomfort. Based on my understanding of the mechanics and based on all the research that I've tried to read and follow over the years, if you are 70 and 80 and you can still do cat-cow with a full range of motion without any discomfort, you are absolutely winning at life. Pose number 8 is your handstand. Gautam the Buddha was asked what he had achieved through his meditation. And the Buddha replied that he hadn't actually achieved anything. What he had done was let things go. The whispering mind that convinces us that we can't do things, anxiety, stress, all these things are let go. Advancing ourselves isn't always about learning, it's almost like unlearning, it's about letting things go. And in that respect, the handstand might be the most yogic posture of them all. I often say that yoga isn't about doing a handstand, but I feel like you have to get through your handstand to understand yoga. If yoga is stillness of mind, what pose better helps us understand that than the handstand? The mind will talk to you and convince you that you can't do this, you can't do that. You will convince yourself that you are pathetic, that you're not strong enough, but you are. We are all so much more capable. We all have so much potential. And when you do your handstand, you start to view yourself and the world around you completely differently. Trust me on that. The key to handstand is to create muscle memory. You don't need to be strong to do handstand. If you've got 2 arms, you can do your handstand. You just have to repeat the exercise for so many repetitions until your brain creates a muscle memory with the muscles of your core and hips, and over a period of time it will become easier and easier. It is science. You have to trust the process. Pose number 7, Sphinx pose. As I said earlier, in regards to the cat-cow, purely from a health point of view, you don't need to have an excessively bendy spine. What you want is to be able to extend your spine as far as you can in Sphinx and not experience any discomfort. If you can achieve your Sphinx pose without feeling anything in your lower back and middle back, it means you have the right amount of spinal extension, the right amount for a good quality of life. You can have more spinal extension, but purely from a health perspective, you don't need any more extension than what you can create in your Sphinx pose. The pose is all about symmetry and all about breathing. Don't stress your neck muscles, don't stress your shoulder muscles, don't grit your teeth. Try to relax, but constantly resist gravity, and you'll be amazed at how good your lower back will feel over a period of time. Pose number 6 is downward facing dog. Now, if you said to me, Zahir, how do I irritate or annoy my sciatic nerve? I would say do a narrow foot position downward facing dog. I would then ask you to press your heels into the ground and take your gaze to your navel. Now, chances are what you feel in this pose is your sciatic nerve. Do you really want to be stretching and playing around with that? Do you want to wake up that monster? You can, by all means, because to a degree all your tissues in the body need some form of stimulus, but I would err on the side of caution and say you really want to stay away from pulling and stretching your sciatic nerve unless it's something that's been prescribed to you by, a medical practitioner, a flossing exercise, for example. So the best way to avoid irritating your sciatic nerve is don't have such a narrow stance. Get your feet further away from your hands. Don't force your heels down to the ground. Have a slight bend into your knees and then push your hips further back. Turn this into an exercise or a stretch, for your lats rather than the back of your legs. The back of your legs gets so much stimulus in a regular yoga class compared to your lats. So when I'm doing downward dog, I focus mainly on my lats and I just kind of let my legs do whatever they're doing. And you know the whole walking the dog? Seriously, who came up with that? Pose number 5, your Iyengar extended or long stance triangle. This is my favorite triangle variation by far. I try to make this point a lot in class that this variation is simply that. I'm not saying that this is a better version than the Ashtanga version or any other version that you've ever done. This particular version allows me to create a longer spine rather than a side-bended spine, if that makes sense. The big mistake that I see, especially with those new to yoga, is the stance is too narrow. It becomes quite intense on your hamstring and your spine goes into like a side bend. It looks horrible. I imagine it feels even worse. And I know why you're creating a narrow stance, because it almost feels safer. But in my opinion, based on my understanding of biomechanics, I think you're making your life harder than it needs to be. A longer stance feels so much better. It creates a better neural pathway from your brain to your feet because you really have to grip more. It is more intense on your hamstring, but it allows you to keep that spine straight. Pose number 4, your classical forward bend. Understand something. When you do a forward bend, regardless of who you are, regardless of your experience level, and regardless of how good you think you are in forward bend, immediately as you go into a forward bend, your brain goes into an alarm reaction stage. The very muscles that you think you're stretching are eccentrically contracting, meaning they are trying to control you as you bend forward. Think about this. If your brain and nervous system didn't try to control you bending forward, you would just flop and fold. But your brain and nervous system control your movement all the way down. As soon as your hands make contact with the ground, and they should, to combat this alarm reaction stage, you need to breathe from your belly. And this is the process that starts to signal this alarm reaction stage to ease off and allow you to stretch. Simply put, there are a few things that are fundamental in order for the basic forward fold to be a therapeutic pose for your lower back and the back of your legs. You absolutely need to bend your knees, stick your backside out and move from your hips. If you just bend forward from your chest and go all the way down and try to keep your legs straight, you will be in this alarm reaction stage longer than you think. Meaning that the sensation you feel in the back of your legs isn't your body stretching, it's your body resisting. You are in a battle with yourself. The second thing you need to do is bring your hands in contact with the ground. People who do the ragdoll pose, it is absolutely fine for you to be doing ragdoll, but understand that physiologically, biomechanically, you are not stretching anything. If your hands are not in contact with the ground, there is a load for your body to carry. Your backside and lower back have to carry the load of your upper body as it's folded, meaning the muscles contract rather than relax. And the third thing you need to do to fight this alarm reaction stage is try to breathe from your diaphragm rather than breathing from your chest and neck. Pose number 3, and this is the world's greatest stretch. Well, your revolved triangle. So, if you said to me, Zahir, how can I bulge my disc for experimental purposes, of course, I would say if you want to bulge one of your discs and completely destroy the quality of your life, I would take a narrow stance, I wouldn't use a block, I would round my back to make contact with the ground, and with a rounded back, I would then twist my spine. If you keep doing that and keep doing that, you will bulge one of your discs. It just goes without saying. The only way a narrow stance revolved triangle works without damaging your back is if you have really long arms, and therefore your back won't round as much as it would if you have normal arms. Know what I mean? This is why in revolved triangle, the safest way to do revolved triangle is to have a slightly longer stance and rest your hand on a block. Push your hand into the block to kind of feel like you're elongating your spine. Now, if your spine is long, it's in a much healthier place to rotate. Your spine is not really designed to rotate when you're flexed. It is a recipe for disaster, and there are only so many of those movements you can do before you damage the collagen fibers in your discs. It will catch up with you. And anyone who says otherwise, to be honest with you, is saying so through a bias, but has no real understanding of biomechanics. Pose number 2 is gate pose. The muscle that we're trying to stretch here, your QL, is a really pesky muscle, and it contributes a lot to lower back pain. I won't bore you with too much of the details, but essentially it contributes towards compressing your lower back. And in yoga, we are trying to do the opposite. We're trying to elongate the muscles, we're trying to elongate the spine, and we need the muscles that attach to that area to relax. If you want to stretch your QL in your gate pose, you need to work with your breathing, you need to work with your nervous system. This is why on inhale you put in very little effort and you bend only on exhale. Inhale easier, exhale harder. Man, that's a big spider. I'll be honest, last time I saw a spider that big in the house, I had to wake Laura up and she had to deal with it. Be honest, I'm not really proud of that story, by the way. Pose number 1, for me, the most undervalued yoga pose and the best yoga pose ever. Man, how did you get over there? I feel like it's on me. For those of you who come to my class, you know where I'm going, and it's 2 poses in one. It's going from warrior 3 directly into half moon, and then back to warrior 3, and then back to half moon. So why is this my favorite yoga pose? Well, firstly, it's very, very undervalued. Most people who do warrior 3 think of this as a stretch for the back of the standing leg, similar in your half moon. But I say to people all the time, optimum health isn't always about the flexibility around your hip. Sure, it contributes towards health, but the missing factor is durability. You need to have a strong, durable hip as well as a flexible hip. So we're just looking for that balance. And there's no point being able to balance if as soon as I ask you to initiate any type of movement, you crumble like a cookie. So the idea behind Warrior 3 transitioning into Half Moon is not only to challenge the muscles in your standing leg, challenge their durability, especially that glute medius muscle, which is so important to stabilize your hip when you walk. But it's also really challenging and a really positive challenge and stimulus to your core muscles when you transition into your Half Moon. Yoga poses aren't all about flexibility. Some of the poses are designed, like tree pose and handstand and Warrior 3, they were designed to make you durable athletes, durable people who can run, walk, carry things, and just do everyday human things without injuring yourself. And if you're wondering why Shavasana isn't in the top 10, I mean, anyway, that is my top 10 favorite yoga poses ever. I'm out of here. Before I go, if you have any questions for me about yoga or yoga poses or yoga teacher training, please feel free to contact me. Myself or my lovely wife Laura will get back in contact, and I guess I'll see you in my next video.